Good evening and welcome to the Channel Studios here in London for your international news around the world in 5. An image has emerged showing a crude weapon purportedly used by Chinese forces in the fatal brawl along China's disputed border with India. This picture has been widely circulated, showing one weapon allegedly used in the clash, which appeared to be made from iron rods studded with nails. People in India have since held funerals for some of the 20 soldiers killed on Monday. It's the first time there have been casualties between the two countries in at least 45 years. Protesters in the northern city of Kanpur held a mock funeral for Chinese President Xi Jinping, lighting a casket draped in a paper Chinese flag on fire before dumping it into a river. Troops remain on alert on both sides of the border, despite the two governments agreeing not to take any steps to escalate the crisis. Garrett Rolfe, the white former police officer who last week shot dead the African-American RAYSHARD Brooks in Atlanta, has been charged with felony murder.
Charges against Officer Rolfe. The first charge is felony murder.
The former police officer was fired the next day after surveillance video showed his actions. The death of Mr. Brooks further highlighted racial concerns in the United States after weeks of protests over racism and police brutality triggered by the death of George Floyd. Mr. Rolfe faces the possibility of life in prison or the death penalty if convicted. The US President Donald Trump has declared the United States would not close businesses again, as several states reported rising numbers of COVID-19 infections.
We won't be closing the country again. We won't have to do that.
Mr. Trump also commented on the controversial book written by his former National Security Advisor John Bolton, saying Bolton had broken the law by including highly classified material. The book contains revelations about Trump's alleged endorsement of Chinese internment camps and plans to invade Venezuela. The Trump administration is making a last-ditch effort to stop the publication. They claim it would compromise national security. Nearly 80 million people worldwide were displaced in 2019 alone. That's according to a new report of the United Nations. According to the survey, more than 1% of humanity were uprooted at the end of 2019 after fleeing wars or persecution. This would be a record figure, capping a tumultuous decade of massive displacement, according to the UN. The figure rose by some 9 million people from a year before. Syrians, Venezuelans, Afghans, South Sudanese and Burmese were the most displaced populations. Russia has staged its first nighttime Victory Day parade rehearsal ahead of the annual celebration on Red Square. The celebration this year was delayed, of course, due to the coronavirus lockdown. The parade was designed this year to mark the 75th anniversary of the Soviet victory over Nazi Germany in World War II. It was planned to happen on May the 9th, but then was postponed until June the 24th due to the pandemic. Some cities in Russia have cancelled the celebrations altogether due to coronavirus fears, but Moscow's flagship parade is still due to go ahead. Chinese President Xi Jinping says China will exempt some African countries from repaying zero interest rate loans due at the end of 2020. President Xi spoke under the framework of the China-Africa Cooperation Forum. In the president's words, this action would be aimed to ease the pressure on countries particularly hit by the pandemic. South African Airways says the government needs to find more than $500 million of new money to save the company. The airline hasn't made a profit since 2011 and has burned through more than 20 billion rand of bailouts in the past 3 years. Their rescue plan has been repeatedly delayed, with senior officials and trade unions applying pressure for the airline to be saved, despite the COVID-19 pandemic exacerbating its long-standing problems. In Zimbabwe, the government has raised salaries for public employees by 50%. It comes after nurses stopped work at a major government hospital in the capital, Harare, demanding to be paid in US dollars because of soaring inflation. Workers fear the country is returning to the 2008 era when a bout of hyperinflation rendered salaries and savings worthless. And finally, a mysterious 68-million-year-old fossil found on an island on Antarctica's coast may have belonged to a huge marine reptile that lived alongside the dinosaurs. The fossilized egg is the second largest egg on record. The only creatures in Antarctica at that time large enough to lay such an egg were sea-going reptiles. The fossil challenges the widely held belief that these animals did not lay eggs. And that's your international news around the world in 5. Now back to the Channel Studios in Lagos.